Back to Daybreak. Now, yesterday, a joint parliamentary committee released a report on the sugar probe. The report is titled Inquiry into the Alleged Importation of Illegal and Contaminated Sugar in the Country. Now, about 10 minutes or so ago, Fred Ndimuli and his panel took a look at the politics around that report, who needs to be arrested according to the recommendations, etc. But we now want to look into the science of that report. Is the sugar that you're probably consuming this morning with your cup of tea safe? And which sugar had issues from which locations, etc. That's what we want to get into at this moment. Joining me in studio to have this discussion is Dr. Catherine Kunyanga, who is a food scientist with the University of Nairobi. Dr. welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for finding time to be here with us. And for you watching, if you have any questions, I'm sure you have tons of them. 22422 is our SMS line. My iPad is open, ready to read some of your messages, and use the hashtag Daybreak. What are your concerns about the sugar that we are consuming on our tables, especially with some of the revelations in the recent public? Let us know. Dr. let me just get straight into it. You've had a chance to peruse the report. What were your initial thoughts?
For me, my initial thoughts were, I've not seen anything new that we didn't know about. And what I expected is at least some recommendations that address the consumers, the public. What the public should do now that they have been told there is mercury, there is copper, and other things in sugar that was imported illegally to the country. So my worry was, so what should the consumer do? I didn't see that in the recommendations.
You did not see that coming out clearly?
Yes, clearly. Yeah.
Are you convinced, and this might be a very general question, that no stone was left unturned in this whole probe? Or if you were part of that committee, are there other things you'd have told them to also have a look at?
Yes, a lot. For me, I'm worried. First of all, the report just says what was already known, that there was mercury found in sugar from
two locations.
Airport,
Airport,
yeah, exactly.
And Webuye West in Bungoma.
Exactly, that we already knew. And then there's a market surveillance that has been done, I think in 21 counties, and that 40% of that sugar did not comply. But you see, that worries the consumer even much more, that there is actually sugar in the market that is not complying to the standards. But this committee didn't really come out clearly. What then should the consumer do? I know there was one recommendation about recall and destruction of any contaminated sugar that was imported illegally in the country. But I wondered what mechanisms have been placed by this committee to actually assure Kenyans that contaminated sugar is going to be destroyed. How? Do they have any recall plans or procedures that they have set to actually enforce this? Because my worry with food safety issues like this are not only in sugar, any contaminated foods.
And we could even broaden the discussion.
Exactly, it's the enforcement. I mean, the regulations are there, but are they being enforced? That's my worry. That
is your worry?
Yes.
Now, you were quoted in the Standard recently as saying that it's not the chemicals themselves that should scare people. I hope this is your quote, but the state in which they are found. This is because while some chemicals are generally toxic, like mercury, others like copper can be ingested in a form not injurious to one's health. Exactly. I must be honest, when I hear mercury and sugar, I immediately panic. Or copper and sugar. So explain to us from a scientific perspective, what is safe in terms of chemicals and products we eat, and what is not safe.
First of all, and that's why I say these recommendations really, I don't know the basis, because normally we do what we call a risk assessment.
Okay.
A risk assessment usually will establish what form of mercury, for example, was found. Because we have previous studies that show mercury can either occur as a metallic mercury, it can also be in an inorganic form and organic form. The only one that has been quite studied, and even toxicological studies done, is the methyl mercury, which is the organic form of mercury.
Okay.
Okay, this has been, and especially in fish and fish products, and toxicities for these have been established, especially with pregnant mothers and children, whereby you have neurotoxicity. They affect the central nervous system, and the children who are born there have impaired capacity in terms of brain function. That has been well documented, and we have limits of how much of it should be found in fish and fish products. But you see, the reports we are getting, we don't know what form of mercury was in sugar.
So what form of mercury was in sugar?
Yes. How was it analyzed? How was it sampled? For example, I had a quick read of the report. They said they tested, I think, 99% of the bags, but we heard that sugar was in bulk.
So, what did they have time?
Out of those millions of, and exactly within that short time, how am I sure all that sugar was actually tested? This can only be done with a good sampling plan, which we don't know what sampling plan was done, how was the analysis actually done? Can we really trust these results? Those are some of the things as a consumer and as a scientist I would be worried about. And in which form is this mercury being found? This copper. Because
there are different forms of mercury, different forms
yes.
of, you've mentioned methyl mercury, which
lead,
you say is lethal.
Yes, yes.
Are they safe to ingest forms of mercury, maybe in limited doses?
What we talk about in food safety is not about safe, acceptable levels.
Acceptable levels.
As in how much of these contaminants in a food can I take and still be relatively okay or without any toxicities, without me maybe, for example, getting cancer or getting my unborn child affected. How much of it? So that's we talk of acceptable limits.
Okay.
So and that's why we have standards. So if this contaminant in sugar, for example, exceeds this limit, then I'm at risk as a consumer.
Okay.
You get it?
Yes.
That doesn't mean it's not present, but if it goes beyond a certain limit, studies have shown that I'll get some form of toxicity. It will cause harmful effects to my body.
Okay.
Exactly.
Now, what confuses Kenyans even more is this. KEBS, the body that is supposed to, in a sense, regulate the standards of the products or that come into the country or that are used by consumers, were on record saying that the sugar samples never contain mercury. The Joint Parliamentary Committee says otherwise. Is it possible that different tests would reveal different things, that one test would show no mercury, then another test would show, yes, there is mercury? From a scientific perspective? Again,
for me, it's about how the sampling, what sugar, because we are hearing reports of sugar in Ruiru, sugar in Isili, sugar wherever, all over the
Bungoma.
place. Yeah, and then also the country of origin. We are not sure. We've had claims of sugar from Brazil, from Zambia, Malawi. So we are not really sure which consignment really contained this, given that even it came in bulk. And Kifika, we don't know whether they just mix everything up. How is it handled? How do they? I mean, I was surprised to hear that supermarkets actually are bagging this raw sugar without any further processing and putting their brands.
Once again, define for us the different types of sugar. So when you say raw sugar, what exactly do you
see
mean?
The refined one, during processing, we refine sugar so that by the time you're taking your sugar, your table sugar is refined sugar. Sugar is purified, meaning that we aim at least 100%, though most of the times we get around 99.9%. If you get that, you are sure that your sugar is pure, it's okay. Right? But the raw sugar is not really completely processed. So you'll have a thin film of molasses and other contaminants. Yeah? So it needs to be refined for you to get your fine table sugar, which is the white sugar that you take, or table sugar. I mean, a common name for Kenyans is table sugar. So that process has to be done. So when you bag sugar that has not been refined, then are you not only... Exactly.
Are you not only...
So we are really putting consumer at risk. And the fact that it was not even tested. At the country of origin, it should be tested. The exporters should assure us, wherever they are getting that sugar, the country of origin, because we have trade, what do you call them? Trade laws that govern. Yes. And Kenya is among the treaty countries that have signed to WTO and other international bodies that ensure fair trade across countries. So that means we are supposed to comply to that. So for fair trade, we need to know the countries where we got that sugar from. They should be able to certify to us that this sugar is safe. First of all, before it gets to the country and KEBS tests. Okay? And it should be declared in the label that this sugar is okay, it's fit for human consumption, it was tested by this body, and these are the requirements that it complies to. So that should be done.
Technically, if a supermarket bagged that raw sugar, the owner should actually be in court right now.
Yes. And that's why market surveillance is very important. We are even lucky that this came out. We don't know what we've been previously. And not only in sugar. I mean, right now we are importing a lot of products. If you go to the supermarket, I think we have more imports than even exports.
That is correct. Our balance of trade, there is a deficit.
Exactly. So that makes you worry. Apart from sugar, what else are we getting from other countries that is not really fit for human consumption? And this should be declared, even in the labeling, that this product is fit for human consumption.
Let's confront Kenya's worst fear.
Yes.
For discussion's sake, let's say there has been mercury in sugar that's been finding itself on the table. How long a period of ingestion would one need to have taken that sugar for them to feel any effects? And what are the possible effects?
Again, part of why people are not taking this seriously, with chemical toxicities, sometimes take years.
Okay.
It's not like, you see, when we have an outbreak of like virus or a bacteria, you get the effects immediately. You remember when there was a mention of Ebola?
Yes.
Even the Ministry of Health quickly released some precautionary measures that you can do not to get the virus. And since these images were being shown on media that you start bleeding, hemorrhaging, and whatever, people were scared, so they were complying to this. But you see, the problem is with the chemical toxicity, it's about bioaccumulation. So the heavy metals will accumulate in your biological tissues and organs. And later you have kidney failure, your immune system is compromised, your nervous system is compromised, just by that bioaccumulation. Slowly, with years, then this toxicity, you'll see them later. And that's why people do not take this seriously. You know, if it was like a bacteria pathogen, and in food, you get food poisoning, you start vomiting, diarrhea, in the hospital, you're hospitalized.
Yes.
That one, people takes it seriously. But it's good that we tell the consumers really what is in their sugar, what can cause them harm, and not only sugar, any food product that is meant for human consumption.
Okay.
And it is the role of the government agencies that have been tasked with the food safety issues in the country to actually assure or protect the human health or the consumer health.
Okay.
And not only consumers, even animal. Remember, some of these products are also consumed by the animals, and you're going to consume the same animals.
A bit later on.
Exactly.
Let me read an SMS or two here. Someone says, okay, P. Karanja, you've sent us your email address. I'm not sure why, but at least we know it's a method of identification. You say there is nothing like mercury. These are just allegations. Mimi sitaki kujua. And I've read verbatim. Joseph Ndutu says, can the government allow Dr. Kunyanga to take some samples and test them in her lab?
That will be tricky again. Remember, we have government agencies that are tasked to do this. For me, I don't want to blame the agencies because I know they've been doing quite a bit to actually address this. But remember, again, with food safety issues, most of the stakeholders are also supposed to be tasked with some responsibilities. And in Kenya, as I said in previous interviews, we don't have an independent body that can actually take over the mandate of assuring, really, Kenyans that food products in the market are actually safe. KEBS is doing its part, I know that, and other authorities or agencies that have been mandated with this responsibility. But also, we need a lot of education and public awareness, like whatever Njogona is saying, yeah? They need to, and I think that's why he's sending you an email.
Karanja.
Yeah, because remember, in urban centers like Nairobi, we are dealing with elite consumers, so they are able to read their labels and know my sugar contains this or my product contains this. Mercury is possible to be in sugar or not possible, you see. But there are those 90, maybe 80% or so in rural communities. Like my mother down there who calls me and says, should I take sugar or should I stop? What should I do?
How would you respond to such a question?
Even she doesn't know what is mercury in the first place. Now I have to tell mom, you cannot just look at your sugar every time during breakfast and say, this has mercury, this has no mercury. It's the role of the government agencies to assure whatever ends up on your table is actually safe.
End of story.
End of story.
But someone has gone a step further. They're asking, they don't give us a name. Is there a simple way to home test for mercury?
No. I discourage that a lot. I know there are a few things we can train consumers to have a look, like the color. You see, color can tell you a lot about a food product, the appearance, and this simple, but those are not ultimate. Remember things like heavy metals and pesticide residues. These are chemicals. They are found in very small, minute quantities
and
that can only
at the molecular level.
Exactly, and that these can only be detected by using an equipment through good analytical procedures in the lab. Even for us, we have to look at what method of analysis are we doing. And that's why I said, also the method of analysis you use is very important for you to say, really, I've detected this heavy metal in this food at this level. Because some it's in micrograms. How do you home test that? You cannot home test that, yes. And it's even worse for microbial contamination. You're talking of microorganisms that you cannot see with your naked eyes. But you can tell people, again, by appearance, as I said, like, for example, I'll give a quick one, like stale bread. Of course, you'll see some moldy things.
Yes, exactly.
Maybe the off order. Those are simple things that can tell a consumer that this is not safe. But as I said, again, it's the work of the government agencies and regulatory bodies to actually declare this in the label, that this is fit for human consumption, expiry date, so that me as a consumer, now if I mishandle my product at home, it is my responsibility. For example, if you buy a product and keep it for long,
Yes.
beyond the expiry date that has been shown, because the manufacturer actually complied to the food safety requirements in the labeling, and you end up not doing that. Or a product says after opening, refrigerate, and you don't do that. Then that one
is on you.
On you.
But everything else.
But
is
everything else, when you buy your
agency.
product in the market, you should be assured that is safe for human consumption.
I want to briefly give our viewers a summary of some of the findings and recommendations in the report, and then I'll give you a chance to respond to those.
Sure.
In terms of findings, and I read this quoted from that 65-page or so report, the field visits that were conducted in Mombasa at a multiple inland container depots, it was evident that the sugar had been stored in unhygienic conditions, contrary to some of the Kenyan Public Health Act laws. Specific violations included transporting sugar in open tippers, which were also used to ferry other non-food products such as fertilizer. The sugar, I mean, this is unbelievable. The sugar was stored in open warehouses on dusty, contaminated sort of floors with foreign elements such as clinkers and cement around them. What do you think about when you hear such?
No. You see now, you're even making it worse. The fact that you are transporting it with other things, and this is that already when the sugar is already in the country.
Yes.
I'm now wondering, during transport and handling, before it got to the country, how much worse did it go through? How many other products or commodities were transported together with that sugar? And when Kenyans, the first time when I was called for an interview of this nature,
yes,
asking where are these chemicals coming from, there it is. The report says clearly some of the mishandling. Where
they've been stored.
Exactly. The storage, methods. The transport, what was totally not compliant with what it should be done.
Can one tell the difference between raw sugar? Because
yes,
one of the findings says it is not possible to differentiate raw sugar and brown sugar in the absence of lab analysis.
Yes, because they almost, by looking at the color, they almost look at the same. But you see, you have to do some tests to actually show which is which.
So the consumer is on their own, because if I buy something in a supermarket,
and that's why I said it's not the work of the consumer to really establish this. It is the work of the government agencies to actually make sure this is being complied to, and whatever they are getting from the market is actually safe. And that's why KEBS did these market surveillance, just to assure the consumers that whatever they are buying maybe is okay. It's complying to standards, because they themselves cannot do this.
Let me read you some of the recommendations, then you tell me if they make sense to you. Okay, in terms of recommendations from that particular report, remember this report has to be discussed in Parliament and then possibly adopted. All sugar, so let me read 2 or 3 of them. All sugar that does not comply with the set standards should be destroyed within 21 days of the adoption of the report. The government should ban the importation of unbagged bulk sugar and institute measures to guarantee the safety of sugar. The government should ban the importation of raw sugar meant for further processing, so that local cane farmers can then provide that sugar. And KEBS should undertake a thorough review of its existing standards for sugar importation. What are your thoughts on those recommendations? Do they make sense to you?
Partly, but again, as I said, as I read this recommendation, I didn't see how this is assuring the public or the consumers. They have not really been targeted, because for me, these are risk managers who came up with this report, and it's supposed to be used for decision making by the Parliament during the discussion. So it should be very clear, apart from the destruction of the samples that were found not to comply to standards, how else are you actually putting into place control measures of the sugars maybe that are already in the market? What should the consumer do?
The one that's
we wait for the 21
right
days
yes,
for them to destroy. So what will be happening if there is already contaminated sugar in the market?
Are you taking sugar yourself, Daktari, right now?
I don't take sugar. It's rare.
Okay, so I've
gone to sweeteners, but again, we already have also public health issues with sweeteners. But for me, I think as you get older and like my age, you should even minimize your sugar intake, because we have already health concerns with too much sugar. And I know most Kenyans know this. So for me, I try and minimize that as much as I can.
But it was more of a health decision even before this whole mercury.
Yes, way before.
Let me read one more message here. Yes. You don't give us your... you're a soil chemist from the University of Nairobi. Okay, you say there is an even bigger worry than mercury in sugar. Heavy metal toxicity in phosphate fertilizers, especially cadmium. The EU does not allow any fertilizer containing more than 20 ppm cadmium. There is a great concern that the fertilizer entering Kenya has more than 300.
I agree totally. As I said last time again during my interview, that we can also, people are asking where are these heavy metals coming from. It can also come from the soil, and especially from these fertilizers that we also use to fertilize the soil. So that is possible. Again, if we do not monitor the fertilizers that is coming into the country, then we also have a possibility of these transferring to our food crops and finally into our food.
Would you be able to tell that there's been infiltration through fertilizer in a final product? You know, at least with the sugar you can almost test, but can fertilizer that has been sort of tampered with really get into a plant in a way that you can't separate sort of what is good within the plant?
That is highly unlikely. If the fertilizer already contains high levels beyond limit of these heavy metals, then there is a high likelihood or probability that these will end up in your plants and finally in your food product. And that's one of the source of how we get pesticide residues and other chemical residues like heavy metals.
Okay.
Yes, he is right on point, and I'm glad that he brought that up, because apart from the heavy metals, we have pesticide residues that are coming from the fertilizers or chemicals that we use when the plant is growing. Again, that's why I said food safety, you look at it all the way from production to the last point. And that's what I was saying, what you read in the report, that there was a lot of mishandling of the product at the port. And I told you, even way before that, we don't know
the country of origin, whether Zambia, whether Brazil.
Yes, given what I know, I don't even to know how, first of all, it was even transported. And you know, it's by shipment.
Yes.
What else was in those containers?
In 30 seconds, if the chairperson of the joint committee was watching this program, Kanini Kega or the vice Haji, what would you tell them?
I'll tell them to, before making recommendations like this, it's good to investigate further and get a scientific opinion from experts in this area, because as I said, we are many. It's all the way from the soil chemist, we have agronomists. If you look at the best practices like EFSA, they engage all the people concerned, maybe in sugar, and then those are the people who give you some opinion or some conclusion. And based on that, the committee now sits and reviews that and gives a way forward. Okay. And most important of all, consumers or the public is still worried. This report has actually now confirmed that the sugar in the market is contaminated. That
some sugar in the market
and they have released how much they sampled and how many were positive for contamination with heavy metals. So now the public will be more worried before they even discuss this in the parliament, because we are still taking this sugar.
I'm actually
so I would recommend that they talk, we call it risk communication. They communicate to the public, give them a bit of control measures that may be as a first form of line of defense. What should I do as a consumer? Meanwhile, as you do all this, remember this committee has sat how many days? Is it 10 days or so?
Okay, it's been a bit longer because they had an interim report first, and then they went back and came up with this one.
Yeah, which they were told to do within, and then the sugar will be destroyed within 21 days. So meanwhile, the public is asking, what should I do as a consumer? Dr.
Catherine Kunyanga, food scientist, UON, I am also worried. Thank you for that. I hope the stakeholders in that committee, I hope parliamentarians are watching. Kenyans still need more answers to this puzzle. Thank you for finding time to join us this morning. Fred, I don't know what your thoughts are, even as I'm sure you love your morning cup of tea.
It is a bit scary to learn some of what we've learned this morning, and it makes you rethink using sugar.
They will drink water. Fred, go ahead.
Yes, time now to take a look at some news updates. A man who has been allegedly conning members of the public and intimidating police officers in Eldoret while claiming to be a military officer has been arrested. The suspect, Benson Makan Boyo, was arrested after he stormed the Kapsoya police post and tried to secure the release of another man. Police say the man, who has been claiming to be a Kenya Air Force officer, had vowed to teach the police a lesson if they failed to release his friend, who had been arrested after a scuffle. He was charged with impersonating as a KDF officer and restraining police officers from performing their duties. He was released on a 20,000 shillings cash bail.
This person came and introduced himself as a senior officer in the government, that's working with the KDF. But the officers doubted him. They wanted him to produce an identity card to show that he is working for the army. But he became arrogant. He started harassing the police officers. The police officers then arrested him and started interrogating him. On interrogation, they found that this person was actually cheating the officers. The officers have made a step by even visiting his residence, and also the area people who confirmed that this person is not working with the army.